everyone, welcome to episode number 7 of the Photo Show. My name is Brian Matias. Today is Wednesday, May 11th. Thank you for joining me so much. This is the very first Facebook Live broadcast that's devoted to photography and videography and the technology that surrounds it. So if you have any questions, do me a favor and just leave them in the comments section. And I'll be checking in every so often to address them. A big part of today's show is going to be me sharing my screen, so I'm going to have different windows up. So I'll check in every now and then. So the idea for today's show came to mind on Sunday, this past Sunday. I went with two of my friends to photograph Proxy Falls, which is along the Mackenzie River in Oregon. It's about a 2.5-hour drive. And I'm a big fan of geotagging. So geotagging is basically this ability to take specific latitudinal and longitudinal GPS coordinates and then apply them to your photos. And that way you'll know exactly where you are. The thing, of course, to remember is that you have to get those coordinates, when you're shooting. You have to be capturing that and somehow sync it. So a while ago, I actually wrote this post called Geotagging Made Easy. Yeah. And I focused more on the cell phone or the smartphone component of things. So I'm going to share this with you really quickly right here. Here's the post. So you can get to the post. I'll give you the link in a second, but the post walks you through basically everything that you need to know about using your phone. And in this case, I was using an iOS app, but there are Android apps, and I did my best to kind of show you how to get the necessary GPS file that will allow you to append the latitude and longitude stuff to your photos in Lightroom. So, excuse me, let me just switch back here, and there we go. Ooh, that was a cool effect. I was playing around with those effects there. So that's you can get that post if you go to this kind of link that I have listed. It's brians.photos. That's kind of like my custom bit.ly link. So brians.photos /LR geotag for Lightroom geotag. So let me kind of show you what I do now. This is kind of how I geotag my photos. So right here, this is, let me turn on the light so you can kind of see it better. That's you see there's the light glare. This is a Garmin Fenix 3. So Garmin, you should know, makes GPS devices for like years. More likely than not, if you have like a kind of a GPS screen in your car that's not built in, more likely than not, it's a Garmin. I learned about this watch. It's the Fenix 3, and it costs about $500. The Fenix 2, though, you can get for like $350, and it has a built-in GPS radio. So here's how I work. I'll just kind of walk you through the settings, and then we're going to switch over to the computer, and I'll actually show you how I geotag my photos that I took. So the first thing that you want to do is put the watch on. And then go to your location. So when I get to my location, actually the first thing, the most important thing that you have to do if you want this to work correctly is sync the time on your watch to your camera. So before any shoot, one of the kind of workflow things that I have is I go to the back of my camera and I look at the time here, and I sync it. So So that makes sure that as the capture date and time is written to each photo with the camera, that capture date and time matches with the watch. And then I basically I tell the camera or the watch rather, to start capturing the geolocations, and you can set the interval, how often it should ping for an update of the location. The higher the frequency of your interval, or the lower the interval, the more battery power it uses. But for the most part, even the default settings will give you really good read of your progression. So again, first thing I do, I have the watch here, and then the next thing that I do, I go out, I shoot, I sync the time, I shoot, and I ignore the watch. The watch I just use to tell me the time. It'll show me the distance that I've traveled, so that's also a good idea of how long I've hiked for, while, for the duration of the capture. So as soon as I start capturing the GPS information, this will start telling me how long I've been walking for. And then it'll also show me things like temperature and altitude and stuff like that. And you can pair, if you care, you can also pair an optional heart rate monitor, so it can track your heart rate. But when I'm hiking, I'm not going for fitness per se, even though fitness is a really wonderful byproduct. I'm going for shooting. So what I do here is I get home, and this is the I can't stretch it out too far. This is the charging dock. It's basically, this is a proprietary dock for the Phoenix 3, and it just connects to a USB port on the other side. So I have it connected right here to my iPhone. And all you have to do is snap it in. Wait, so there's these contacts on the bottom side here. Come on, camera, focus. There we go. There are the contacts, and you have to match the contacts up over here. So this way. All right. So now it's charging and it's communicating with the computer. Let's go. I'm going to switch over to the computer right now. And let's minimize this for a second. Actually, before I move on, let's look at if there are any questions or anything there. Yeah, Peter. So Peter's saying there's no way to access the timeline to skip the countdown. Correct. This is, like I said, if you're watching the recording, the archive. So, all right. So here's how I do things. The first thing I do is I open up Basecamp. So Garmin Basecamp is a piece of software that you can download from Garmin, and it's used to interact with the watch. So you can see here, you have the kind of state of the world. And the first thing I do while it's looking up here for the devices is I go to the collections section, and I sort by newest first. That way it'll show me the most recent geotagged information, or the most recent GPX file that it wrote to. It's not the fastest thing. I'm sure that the connection between the camera and the computer is not. It's definitely a USB 2, but it did find the watch. So there's the Phoenix 3, and you can see it identifying here, which means you can also manage multiple Garmin watches, or even just GPS units. This is the same software you'll use if you have like the GPS Oregon 600, which is the device I used to use. What's happening now is the software is reading the information off of the Phoenix, and when it's done, you'll see all the GPS files here. And I'm actually kicking myself because I meant to have this done in advance, but I couldn't because I wanted to show you the watch up front, or close up, and I'd have to remove it from the dock. So we just have to wait a second for it to show me the files. In the meantime, what I'll do while this is happening, I'll switch over to Lightroom. And so I have the photos imported here, but I'm going to walk you through the process really quickly of how I import. Just to kill time, let me actually check to see if it's still going on. Okay, so when I import my photos, here's the SD card that I used. On the right is really what I want to show you. So this is just a quick intro. I always build a one-to-one preview of my files. I'm shooting usually with a Sony a7R Mark II, so it's like a 40 plus megapixel file, and I like to zoom in a lot when I'm viewing the photos. So I'll take the kind of time hit up front for it to generate the full one-to-one previews. The next thing I'll do is I'll select to rename files. I like to have this is a default template, so it's the date. So it's year, month, day, / the original file name. I have my own metadata preset, which I can show you really quickly here. It's pretty straightforward. It basically has, I update the copyright year every year, show that it's copyrighted. I have a link to my usage terms, and then I have my physical address for my company, which is a PO box. And that's basically, with that, that's appended to every single photo. Keywording is one of those things that I think is very mysterious to a lot of people. So usually with keywording, what I do is I apply the broadest keywords. So like, I know this is Oregon. I know that this is near the Mackenzie River. I'll also say Proxy Falls, and do things like nature and trees, waterfalls. So I'm kind of applying very broad terms. And then finally, just the destination of where it goes. So I'm not going to do this because I already imported them here to save time. Fortunately, here's the base camp. So let's minimize Lightroom for a second. Here are all of my geotags taken with the watch. So here's the one from Sunday, May 8th. I select it here, and you know, it'll show you actually, if you want, where it was taken. There's kind of, I started it while I was driving, and kind of you can see the path. So with that done, what I'll do is I go to File, Export Selected User Data, and then I'll just hit Save or Export. And you can see on the desktop, it puts out what's called a GPX file. And this is important because GPX is the file format that Lightroom will use to pull in the files. So back in Lightroom, you might notice here, one of the first things, I'll close this out so you can see larger thumbnails. You might notice something, that there are duplicates of every photo. And the reason for that is I have I shoot on my camera using RAW plus JPEG. I do that because by having a RAW file and a full res JPEG, if I want to transfer photos from my Sony camera to my phone or my tablet over Wi-Fi, if I just shoot RAW, then it's only going to send the embedded JPEG preview to my phone, which is low resolution. If I want to have a high resolution photo, I need to shoot RAW plus JPEG or just JPEG. Now, there's a setting in Lightroom that you have to go to, and I think it's under if you go to Lightroom and then Catalog Settings, where is it? Or is it under, I think it's under Preferences. I will find this in a second. Here it is. Under Preferences, under General, there's a checkbox that says treat JPEG files next to RAW files as separate photos. And that's important because if you don't, then you'll only have one file for each photo, but it'll say in the corner, it'll say RAW plus JPEG. Now, when I import the photos to my computer, I don't need the JPEG files. So the first thing I do is I go to my library filter, I select text, and I just type in the word JPEG, making sure that any searchable field contains all JPG, which is the file extension. Here are the results. I select all, I hit X to set the rejected flag, and then I hit Command or Control backspace, and this deletes all the JPEGs. So now I'm left with just the RAW files, which is all I wanted. Okay, so I've got all the photos here, all the RAW files. Now it's time to actually geotag the photos using that GPX file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command A, and this is important. You have to select all. So you can kind of go to, you know, through the menus to select all, or hit Command or Control A, and you can see everything is highlighted. Now, I'm going to go over to the map module. And if you're confused why I only have 3 modules, you may not know, this is actually not very discoverable, but if you right click, you can turn on and off modules. So like if web is something that's important to you, you can have it, but I don't use anything except for library, develop, or map, so why do I need them there? So I'll select map, and here is map using Google Maps, which is awesome. On the bottom here, you can see this little squiggly line, kind of like a track route. Select it, and then you're going to select Load Track Log. And this is what you're going to use to point to the GPX file that we just took off of the watch, which is right here. So I'm going to select it and hit Choose. And what will happen is Lightroom will overlay the actual GPX. So you can see this is basically the exact same pattern that we saw in Basecamp. See? Same basic thing, just a much lower resolution map. And here's where selecting all of your photos is important. Watch, actually, I'm going to deselect to illustrate this. So go back to map. My track log is loaded and I only have one photo selected. When I go to the, oh, I have no photos selected, sorry. So if you have one photo selected and you go to map, when I go back to the squiggle, it says here auto tag selected photo, one selected photo, which I don't want. I want to tag all of them. So that's why it's important to go here and select all your photos. Then go to map, and now it'll say auto tag 78 selected photos, which I do. Lightroom goes through, and this is a message that'll come up the first time. And basically it's asking if you want to enable address lookup, which I always do. So I just hit enable. And it says allow Lightroom to send GPS coordinates to Google Maps for address lookup. Basically, I'm okay with this. If you're the type of person that wears like a tinfoil hat and you are kind of wary of everything Google does, then hit disable. But for me, I worked for Google. Google has enriched my life in very many ways, figuratively and literally. And so I'm okay with sharing where I was with Google. No big deal. So I'll hit enable. Cool. So with that done, you can see here, it has the 77 photos. There's also one up here, totaling 78. And if I zoom in, it'll show me specifically where I was. So this was the hike to Proxy Falls, and this is pretty cool. I started by taking a few photos here on the trail, and then we reached this point where the trail forks, and going to the left, or to the, the camera right here, goes to Upper Proxy Falls. And you can, if you select one of the chips, you can scroll through the previews. So you can see the photos that you took. So I started here, and then I moved my way to Lower Proxy Falls, which is, in my opinion, the best part of the waterfalls. And so that's basically how I use it. And you can keep zooming in up until a certain point. And here's what's important for me personally. This is what I like to see, the scatter. Instead of, I would be more concerned if I had all of the 20 some odd photos in one spot. That means that I just stood there and took the same photos over and over again. But what this is showing me is that I walked around a bunch looking for good vantage points. And actually up here, there's a bit of a scramble upward to get closer to the falls, which you can kind of see right here. So that's basically it. And then if we go over to the right or to the left, here's Lower Proxy Falls, and you scramble down. Here's the scramble right around here, and then I kind of hiked through. I was basically standing at the base of the falls. So how do you know if your photo is now geotagged? Well, let me see if I can zoom. Oh wait, hold on. How do I zoom in? I forgot. I thought there was a keyboard shortcut. Anyway, it's right here. There on each, in the grid view, there's a little, it looks like a pin. And if you, it says here, photo, this is the tooltip, photo has GPS coordinates. So if I click on this, it'll take me to the specific location. And you can see the lava rock around here. So if I go back, I was taking, here's the lava rock that shows in the map. So to me, this is brilliant. This is something that I do with every shoot that I go on. All right, let me jump back here. All right, so also bring that up there. Cool. So who is, geotagging for? It's probably not for kind of the commercial portrait photographer who's always shooting in a studio. Or in other words, if you're shooting from the same place over and over. If that's the case, geotagging is not really useful for you. Geotagging, in my opinion, is super useful, obviously for landscape photographers, especially if you're heading to locations that are, that are not native to you, so you're traveling somewhere. That's super helpful. Travel photography, obviously, that's very helpful when I travel around. When I was in Venice last year, or Cuba earlier this year, it's important for me to know where I was, so I can, if I need to reference a particular area, other than just saying I was in Cuba or in Havana, I want to say I was in, Park Central, or I was by this particular canal in Venice. That's important. Also, that helps if you're a stock photographer to have that information, because you can include the geo information there, and you can keyword it accordingly. So those little things can pay back with dividends if you do it right. And then for, just basically anyone who, if you're going, you're not necessarily a landscape photographer or you're a travel photographer, but you're going on vacation somewhere. You can do that as well. Now, it's also important to note, I have here kind of what I'm using. So again, Garmin Fenix 3 GPS watch, the Garmin Basecamp software, and Adobe Lightroom CC software. There are some cameras on the market that actually have GPS built in. So some of the kind of mid-tier Canon cameras, and I think some Nikon cameras have GPS built in. I know Sony's Action Cam has GPS built in. And then there's some third-party companies that will make GPS radios for cameras. Actually, Canon does that. So if you have like a 5D Mark III, I think it's the Canon GPE2. It's this big chunky radio that sits in the hot shoe. But the benefit to that is it automatically writes the specific latitude, longitude coordinates, and things like the altitude to each photo as you take it. So it essentially eliminates this entire process. When you import the photos into Lightroom, those photos, the geo information is already there. Now, here's another reason, I just thought of this as I was talking, a benefit of geotagging. Instagrammers. So a while ago, Instagram rolled out the ability to browse their Explore pages by location. So historically, you had to kind of guess where you were. Originally it sucked because it only allowed you to Instagram only allowed you to geotag where you were. They recently updated that so you can geotag anywhere else in the world. But in my case, if you go to episode 1 of the photo show, I walk you through how I share photos from Lightroom to Instagram using Lightroom Mobile. In that process, if my photo is geotagged in Lightroom, that information gets synced to Lightroom Mobile. So on my phone, I have the photo I want to share with the geo information. When I go and take that photo and share it to Instagram, Instagram actually looks and it says, oh, there's geo information here, and it does the automatic lookup, the reverse lookup. So it's one less thing that you don't have to worry about. And it's wonderful. For Instagram, that's important because it helps with discoverability. So let's go. I'm going to go back to the Facebook post, and I want to see if there are any questions. We got a bunch of questions. Never knew about this. So Josh Carlisle saying, never knew about the RAW plus JPEG. So to confirm, if I put the RAW file under Sony Play Memories, I'm only getting a low resolution version to edit through Snapseed. That's correct. So Josh, not only do you have to, you're correct, Josh. So what Josh is saying is, if I'm only shooting RAW and I send a photo through Play Memories, which is the Sony app, I'm only getting the low-res file. Correct. If you're just shooting RAW, because the camera, the Sony camera, is not going to create a JPEG file for you. Every time the camera creates a RAW file, part of its workflow is it creates a small JPEG preview. Because that's when you hit the preview button on your camera, on any camera, you're not seeing the RAW file, you're seeing the JPEG preview. Which is why if you do a creative style like, sepia or I don't know, whatever the kind of different creative styles they have, that's why, or black and white, that's why when you preview it, you actually see the JPEG preview in black and white. The RAW file, as you know, doesn't get touched. So 2 things you have to do. Shoot RAW plus JPEG, or just JPEG. And then, Josh, this is very important. In the Play Memories app on your phone, I'll go to it right here. There's a specific setting that you need to do, that you need to set. In the Play Memories app, go to the settings button, and this is the same for Android and iOS. The first setting is copy image size, and the default is 2M, which is 2 megapixel. You want to hit original. And because if you don't, even though you're shooting JPEG, it's still going to pull the JPEG preview. So make sure you set it to original, and then just to prove it to yourself, set it to 2M, send the file over, then change it to original, send the same file over, and then download an app like Photo EXIF, which all it does is it shows you the EXIF information, and you'll see the resolution difference is significant. And that is a big thing for several reasons. The original resolution helps if you're editing on an iPad because it's a larger display. You can zoom in. Obviously, also you have more latitude to crop, and things like basic tonal recovery. Even though it's still a JPEG file, you have more latitude there. So very important and good question. So there was a question here about how long does the battery in the watch last? Okay, that's a great question, Tor. So the question here is, how long does the battery on this watch last? When, not just the watch, but when GPS is on. So this is not unlike the Apple Watch. I can't get by a day, maybe a day and a half without charging, because it's this is kind of a higher res LCD display, and this is a kind of a lower tech watch. I mean, it has a little backlight button that you could use, but for the most, what it also has, I totally forgot. It has smartwatch capabilities. So you can pair this. It has a Bluetooth radio. You can pair it with your phone, and your phone can send all notifications here. And one of the great things about this that didn't happen when it first came out, the watch, is you can now, if you clear the notification on your watch, it'll clear it on the phone. And that's awesome. But it's one way, meaning unlike the Apple Watch, where if you message me, I can respond back with voice, I can't do that with this. This is basically, it just shows me the notifications, which is fine. So to answer the question again, Tor, without navigation on, this thing will last a week and a half, no problem. With navigation, I've had this on like in Cuba, where navigation was going on for like 10 hours a day, and it would maybe take 40% of the battery, so I had 60% left. And it was with constant navigation, no stopping or anything. The other nice thing about this is that the recharge time on this watch is super quick. Like, this was at about 85% before the show started, and when I connected the watch to the phone, it's back at 100% now, and it was on for maybe 15 minutes. So, yeah. And Gary, it looks like you asked the same question, so I think I killed two birds with one stone. Facebook also suggests locations closer to geotag in photos. Josh is saying, correct. I think a lot of these social media platforms are looking at the metadata of the photo you upload and doing basically the reverse address lookup for you. And I appreciate that personally. In Facebook, it's important to me because not only does it show it, like the location, but it shows how many people have checked in there recently. And so I want to check. I want to be able to check in to play a particular place. Let's say the Mackenzie River has 3 different options. I'm going to check into the one that has the highest number of check-ins, because when people do a search for Mackenzie River, I want my content to be part of that search, as opposed to, one that's more abstract or obscure. So, that's important. All right, so here, John's also saying some apps will also geo-track, and you can import the file like your Garmin, but my question is, using a phone internationally, will GPS work and create a track log if I don't have a data plan? Great question. So what John is saying is, like, let's say, unless you're a T-Mobile user. So if you're a T-Mobile user like me, then I get free international data roaming. I haven't gone to a country yet where I didn't get it. But if you're not a T-Mobile user, let's say you're a Verizon user or AT&T, obviously you don't want to burn a huge hole in your wallet by roaming data internationally. Fortunately, though, even in airplane mode, the GPS radio will still work. So let's say you launch one of the GPS apps, or you take a photo with your phone and you have GPS turned on. Even with airplane mode off, GPS will still work. It'll still pull. It's not actually using data. Part of that is because it's always the phone's using its accelerometer. So it's giving kind of like some sort of spatial recognition. So here's what will happen. If you start a log with one of the apps. It'll keep track of where you're going throughout the day, even with airplane mode on. However, what won't work, and this only affects if you're looking live, is it won't actually draw the map. Drawing the map needs data. So you're kind of flying blind, for lack of better words. However, that GPX file will still be totally valid. I've tested this myself. And you can export it from the app into cloud sharing storage solutions like Dropbox or Drive or iCloud, and then take that into Lightroom. So again, just to recap, if you want to see that post, there's the URL. It's brians.photos/LR geotag. Kind of walks you through how I use, before I use the Garmin watch. To be honest, I don't use the app anymore unless I have my Apple Watch on, but whenever I go shooting, I take it off, I put the Garmin watch on because it's just more convenient for me. And it gives me a lot of good information, like, little things that can help. So Tor came in with a comment. One way to geotag images is to drag them onto the map. Of course, yes, correct. Of course, you have to know where to drop them. So what Tor is saying is, like, you can actually take the photos and drag them around a map, but your precision's much less. Like with this watch or your phone, we're talking about specific latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates. So it's as accurate as you can get. And some people might not care. They might just want to know the city they were in which case you don't even need to geotag. Well, you can. You just type in the city, and Lightroom will kind of put it somewhere in the city. Josh is saying, so Josh is actually touching on John's question about GPS during airplane mode. And what Josh is saying is with cellular off, GPS on the phone will take several minutes to get a lock. I don't think a GPS uses data if you leave cellular on, though. Correct. So that's one of the things, actually, with the watch and with the phone, one of the things you want to budget is when you start tracking. Usually I'll start when I'm kind of driving. It takes three taps on this to start tracking. But when it starts tracking, actually what it's actually doing is it's first looking for a GPS lock. And once it finds one, then it vibrates and it gives me kind of this kind of indication that GPS has been locked and it's tracking. And then I can stop it, I can pause it and resume it, those types of things. John is asking the Garmin watch, the model. Absolutely, I'll bring this back up here. There it is. So it's Garmin Fenix 3. Again, it's about $500 on Amazon. If you don't want to spend that kind of money, there's a Fenix 2. I don't know off the top of my head the differences between the two. My buddy James Brandon has the Fenix 2, and it works fine. He was actually really happy with it. So that one I think is around $350. All I care with the watch, other than telling me the time and the fact that it has smart notifications which is icing, all I care about is that it is able to track GPS and export a file that Lightroom can read, which, as I illustrated earlier, hits both of those marks. So that's, I think I got all the questions, right? Yeah, I think I got all the questions. If there are any other questions, shoot them out now. Otherwise, we'll wrap things up. But I hope, this was one of those things, like I said, I was out shooting on Sunday. I was like, this could be kind of cool, because I know I've written the post that you can see the link at, but I never actually walked people through the hardware and the software workflow of how I geotag my photos. And I do this religiously every single time I go out. So I hope, is GPS Tracks the app you still recommend? Yeah, so Josh is asking, in the article that you can see here, I recommend an app called GPS Tracks. That's still the one that I use for iOS. On Android, there are different options, and so Google used to make their own app. I think it was called My Tracks, and it was free. It was fantastic, but they discontinued it. So, in my opinion, I think I have I link the Android version of the app, Gaia GPS, which is cross-platform as well, and it's a premium app, meaning you have to pay for it. Just spend the money. If you know the 5, 10, 20 bucks that the app costs. I mean, if you don't want to spend 350 or 500 bucks for a watch or a dedicated GPS tracking device, just fork over the money and get the app. But for me, GPS Tracks has worked forever on iOS, and they have an Apple Watch companion app, and it just works. Again, you don't want to overcomplicate things. Hit start, get a GPS lock, do your thing. And actually no, same thing with your phone. Make sure, this is super important, don't forget this. Before you start shooting, whether it's your watch or your phone, sync the time. Both the watch and the phone are pretty damn accurate with the time. So all you need to do is go into your camera, make sure the date is correct, obviously, and then I wait for the next minute to start, before I commit the new time. So that way it's as close as possible. Otherwise, because the date and the time is the kind of the binding key between the GPS track and the watch, or the photo, if that's off, then it'll still append a geolocation, but it's going to be incorrect based on where you were. It uses the time as the unifier. So yeah. Do you use saved locations in the map module? I don't. Tor's asking if I use saved locations in the map module. No. To be totally honest, once I geotag the photos, like through the workflow process I showed you, I'm done. I don't I don't even look at anything. Like I'll look at the geolocation for that photo when I'm editing it and then when I'm getting ready to share it. But beyond that, saved locations and stuff like that doesn't really come into play. It's an interesting question though. So, all right, I think I've given you guys enough meaty stuff to kind of chew on. So with that, if you have any questions, let me actually bring this up here. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to see covered, these are all the ways you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and YouTube /Brian Matias. That's my kind of handle on every single network. And so do me a favor and let me know what you want to see on the show. Like I love, like, especially Brian Nelson, if he's not watching live, he'll watch the replay. He's a member of my Facebook group called Evolve Your Eye. He's fantastic in providing kind of questions, fodder for future shows, which I personally am supremely appreciative for. So I would love to hear what you want to see, whether you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube or on my site. All three of those platforms support comments. Just leave a comment and I will happily, build a show around it. So with that, thank you guys and girls, obviously, for joining me on episode 7 of the photo show, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye, everyone.